Hi, I'm Rebecca Lucero, and today we're going to be talking about multifamily groups. And this is a model of therapy for families who have an addict in the family. And usually you'll see this in a treatment center where they'll invite the families in to do group therapy. So you have several different families doing therapy together. So we're going to talk about this model of therapy and just give you an idea of what goes on and why this is a useful form of treatment for addicts and their families. So first, I wanted to start off by letting you know that the multifamily groups are often focused on psychoeducation. And so what this means is that we're educating the families about addiction and what's going on in their family dynamics. So as we educate the families, not just the addict, but the whole family in this kind of group setting, this is going to help everyone in the family to improve their coping skills, reduce stress in the family. It's going to help individuals manage their addiction, so it also helps the addicts themselves. And it's also going to provide social support for both the addict and the family. One of the greatest things about this multifamily group model is that it provides a supportive social network for the families. So often we know that addicts will go into treatment in a group setting and that they receive a lot of support there. They find understanding, shame is reduced. Families also need this because they're all part of the same system. So what can happen is the addict can receive a lot of support, but if the family isn't receiving support, then the addict goes back into the family system and the family system's not changed. So when we treat the whole family as part of this group setting of therapy, it can be really helpful in providing that social network, extending that beyond the addict to the whole family. And what it does is it's going to normalize communications. It's going to help reduce the stigma, right? The addict is very aware of the shame that they feel, the stigma that they have, but also the family has a little bit of a stigma, right? Because most likely socially it's known that their son or their daughter or the husband has been an addict, and it really reflects on the whole family, at least in society. So helping reduce the stigma for the whole family can be very helpful because the whole family is being defined by this addiction in many ways. It's also going to help provide assistance with crisis intervention. So knowing that there's other families around and getting, hearing their ideas and learning from their experiences can be really helpful as each family tries to navigate their own recovery. So here we're going to talk about the multifamily curriculum, and I'm just going to give a basic overview of some of the things that might be done in a typical multifamily group. This is a curriculum that's based off the reading that you did, but I'm just going to go over it so you kind of have a greater understanding of what was discussed in the reading. So the first module of the curriculum is going to be based on teaching the basic family systems concepts to the whole family. So these are a lot of the things that we've been learning in this class, right? Some of our curriculum is a mirror to this curriculum that we're teaching the actual families of addicts. We talked about in great detail about the family system, how the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So this is going to help families to be able to understand that the addiction is not just a one-person problem, but is a family problem. We're going to talk about homeostasis in this setting where we help the family to realize that they're all a little bit resistant to change and that they all play a part in keeping the addiction going, right? They're all part of this process that maintains the addiction. We're also going to talk about generational transmission. So often they'll do genograms where they're exploring their family history and understanding, where addiction lies in the whole family as far as, grandma and grandpa and as far back as they can go. So this is going to help them to see that it's not just their son's problem or their wife's problem, right? This is a problem that has been in the family for many years and many generations. The second module is going to be focusing on discussing change in recovery. So we're going to be talking about change at the individual level, right? That's the change of the addict, and also the family changing. The way that we do this in this type of curriculum is going to be to talk about the stages of change, right? We talked about that last unit about the stages of change, and so here we're going to be discussing this with the families, helping them understand that while the addict also goes through these stages of change, right? They're going to be pre-contemplation, contemplation of getting into recovery, preparation for recovery, action, right, where we're actually taking steps to get into recovery, and maintenance, right, where we are maintaining our recovery. So just as the addict has to take these steps for their own recovery from the addiction, the family also has to take these steps as well. So just like we talk about, enablers, right? The enabler also has to be in a pre-contemplative place, right? They have to be contemplating making changes in their own behavior, setting boundaries, right? They're going to be preparing to make those boundaries and do what they need to do to, develop healthy coping skills and setting boundaries with the addict. They're going to be needing to make their own personal changes to create a healthy family system and change the temperature in the family. They will also need to take action. So it's not enough to just rely on the addict to fix the family. Each person in their own role will have to be going through each of these stages of pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. If we're going to have a healthy family, that means we're going to need to increase flexibility, not have rigid boundaries, not have diffuse boundaries. As we talk about this in the family setting, we're going to help families see how each of them is part of this change and how each of them is responsible for their own individual change that contributes to the family change. The third module focuses on roles and family structure. So again, these are principles that we've previously discussed, but here we're going to be teaching these to the families. We're going to be talking about boundaries, we're going to be talking about power and hierarchy, teaching them about triangulation and roles. We're going to be teaching them about, the roles that they might assume. Although all families probably know that there's one person in their family that's an addict, and they may or may not know that somebody's an enabler. A lot of them have probably never heard about all the different roles that might take place in a family, like the hero, the mascot, the lost child, the scapegoat. All these different roles can be very useful in helping the family to see how they all contribute to the dynamic that is helping the addiction to persist. So as they learn about all these different things, they have the power to change them. Right? A lot of times people know something's wrong. Obviously, they sense something's wrong in their family, but they don't know how to fix it. But as they learn what's wrong in terms of what are they doing wrong with boundaries, then they can learn what a correct boundary looks like, and then they can hopefully implement that. But if they don't know about these things, it's going to be really hard to change the whole family, especially as the addict who's pretty vulnerable and maybe in recovery, but as they enter back into the system, nobody else in the system is aware of ways to change, then a lot of times you'll see relapse. So all of these things are very helpful in helping the whole family to change the system. So the fourth module is going to be focusing on attributes of systems-based sustained recovery. So here we're looking at how do we keep people in recovery over the long run. Here are some principles that are very key to sustaining long-term recovery. The first is hope. People have to have hope that they can do better. Most of the time in addiction, there's a lot of despair. That's one of the reasons people use, right? Things are not going to get better, so it makes sense to use whatever the substance or the behavior to cope with my feelings because I don't have any hope that I can improve them, that I have skills to make this any better. So as people have hope that they can maintain recovery, that they can have a better life, that they can live a sober life, they are able to stay in recovery because they have that continued hope. That the actions or putting off the easy way of coping is going to pay off in the long run. Another thing that's really important is for each, person to develop a unique identity. Often in families where there's addiction, identity really revolves around the substance. It revolves around, the addict being an addict. It revolves around the person being the spouse or the child of an addict. But as they're able to get in recovery, each person can develop a unique identity that really will help improve self-esteem and also self-worth. The next important attribute of healthy recovery is going to be healthy coping skills. Many of the individuals that are coming in don't have any healthy coping skills, which is why they are an addict in the first place. So helping families and individuals to develop healthy coping skills is going to help them to be able to manage their emotions in a new and different way that leads to healthier outcomes, which also leads to the next point of developing a capacity for meaningful relationships. Right? When the person's an addict, they don't have the capacity for a meaningful relationship. Sometimes their minds are altered, which is going to obviously affect that. And in addition to that, when the substance or the addiction is the most important thing in that person's life, there is no room for meaningful relationships. So helping these people to have positive interactions with each other is going to help them to be able to communicate and find ways to develop healthy emotions and healthy communication and develop those meaningful relationships. As these individuals learn how to communicate, They will also have a better capacity for connecting with one another, which connection is one of the main parts of a meaningful relationship, is that people feel connected. It's hard to feel connected with somebody who's under the influence or who is very focused on using a substance or, pursuing a certain type of behavior for relief. The next attribute that I want to talk about is sense of achievement and accomplishment. So when somebody is an addict, they're not going to be accomplishing very much, right? Everything is focused on, getting the next fix, obtaining the substance. And so being able to find things that are worthwhile and give the addict and also individuals in the family a sense of achievement is going to also help them develop a better sense of self, better self-esteem. And so that's kind of an important part, that people tend to that in order to, sustain recovery, people need to be achieving positive things, not just necessarily avoiding the negative things. It's really important that they pursue a life of growth and progress. And then the last point is the reclamation of agency. So when we talk about agency, this is the internal belief that somebody has choice, right? When somebody is an addict, they do not feel like they have choices, right? They feel very compelled. It's very impulsive to use. They're addicted, right? So being able to say, that they have a sense of agency, that they're able to make choices, to choose recovery each and every day, is really important for this person to kind of gain this sense of control, that they have choices. It will help this person to understand that they are no longer a slave to their addiction, right? They admit they're powerless to God, and that's a really important part, but they still have the ability to make choices, to choose recovery each day. So I hope going over this has been helpful in helping you to understand kind of what happens in multifamily groups as far as what the psychoeducation looks like. When these groups meet together, it's very helpful for the families to see each other and other families. We've talked about how in addict families there isn't a lot of communication, right? You're not supposed to talk, you're not supposed to feel. And so when all these families get together, it can be very helpful for these families to see that there's other families just like them, and it allows them to be able to talk about their experiences. This is, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about groups like AA is, the most beneficial part of AA is that it's a social experience in which people are validated for their experiences. There's less shame because we know that somebody else has had the same problem and the same powerless feeling over their addiction. And often families don't have a space to do that. And I think that's a big problem, is the addict can get better and can talk with other addicts, but often the families will feel isolated because it's been part of their experience too. It's part of their history, dealing with the addiction of their loved one. And so being able to talk with other families and see that they're not alone is very empowering for these families, to be able to take the steps to move forward and into recovery. I hope this helps give you an idea of why this model is so useful, rather than just families meeting alone and still feeling pretty isolated and like they're the only ones that are dealing with this. So I hope this gave you a better understanding of what multifamily groups look like and how they can be helpful to addicts and their families.